Welcome parents to Hamilton High School's Parent Presentation Series. We started these parent presentations about 4 years ago because we saw there was a need to provide some support services to parents in our community and within our school. These parent presentations provide a wide range of topics. We have expert speakers that talk about social media, communication, mental health issues, all the areas that teens are going through, and to educate parents on what they can do, resources they can obtain, and just support services. We also have a student educational series at the same time in the evening, so you can bring your child with you and they will go to a separate classroom and they will get education on the same topic. Most teachers give extra credit, but your child will always get 2 volunteer hours for every session they attend. And at Hamilton, we also have support groups that the social workers run. We have support groups for anxiety, depression, and self-harm. We have groups for grief, substance abuse, anger management, and we also provide one-on-one support to students, as well as meet with parents if there's issues you might be struggling with and need some professional guidance. You can come and meet with us. And so at Hamilton, we provide a great deal of services. Please contact us if you need any additional support, or we can sit down and talk about ways that we can help you and your child be successful during these high school years. Thank you so much for coming to our presentations, and these presentations, as you can see, are videotaped and will be available 2 weeks after every presentation, along with the PowerPoint and any other materials. We will have them on our website. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, guys. As Rajani said, my name is Angie Green. Not only am I Executive Director of Addiction Haven, which is an education and advocacy organization here in Phoenix area, I am also a single mother of 4 kids. They are 18, 17, 14, and 6. They're all within 2 months of hitting the 19, 18, 15, and 6-year-old range. So we've been doing teenage years for quite a few years. Now, and I've pretty much had 3 of them in their teenage years for 3 or 4 years altogether, and a toddler that has been raised with teenagers. Therefore, I'm hitting the young kid stage like way earlier than I did with my older kids. He's never known anything but being treated like he should be running and doing all the things that they've been doing, along with having like 4 different parents with all different parenting styles breathing down his neck all the time. So it's been quite interesting. When I started working with teenagers, it kind of pretty much came out of my past, right, as a teenager who struggled with depression that was never diagnosed, that eventually turned into a substance use disorder with alcohol, and then my eventual recovery from that, and watching my kids go and their friends go through things that was pretty tough. My daughter started self-harming in 7th grade, and so we were kind of thrust into that secret world of kids and their struggle now, and the extra pressures that they have, and just the way that social media and the stress of school and everything kind of plays into it. And so my focus then became teenagers that were struggling with depression, anxiety, self-medicating with substance use, self-harm, in the beginnings of eating disorders, because they all were the exact same thing, which was they all wanted to feel different than they felt at that moment, that they weren't comfortable in their own skin, and so they were using something else to feel like they were in control and like they could do something. And what came out of that was that 99% of my kids, when I would talk to them, wished that their parent would have have an open line of communication the way that we did and be able to talk. And 99% of those parents thought that they were providing an open space and an open set of communication for those kids. But the kids, it missed in translation. So the way that the parents thought that they were providing that open space and what the kids recognized as an open space were two completely different things, and they just weren't on the same page. So that's kind of where the effective communication and active listening skills came in. All of the suggestions that I have right here are from teens themselves. They've all been, if you could tell your parents, or if you could ask your parents to do one thing different when they're communicating, what would it be? And across the board, it was the 5 things we were going to talk about. A little background is that, adolescents with a major depressive disorder in the past year are 2 more times likely to use illicit drugs. That includes anything, right? Marijuana, cigarettes, alcohol, all of those things. And that of those that use substances, they have a 2.5-fold increase in risk for suicidal behaviors. So we all know that's been in the media. The East Valley has been hit extremely hard with suicides. And this is truly, the communication and the active listening piece is truly, truly, truly the foundational piece that needs to be in place as a protective factor for substance use and for depressive episodes. It really, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office held a youth conference today at Grand Canyon University, and it was called Stand Up, Speak Up, Save a Life. And there was 3,500 students there. And I'm looking across all of those, and I'm a statistics person, and this is what I do in my, everyday life. So of course I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, there's 3,500 350 at the very minimum that are going to be in active addiction by the time that they're 19, 20 years old. And it was astounding because I'm listening to all these speakers, and they were great speakers, amazing things that were going on. And not one of them talked about how to communicate with the kids. They all talked about, these are the risk factors. This is the problem, and this is the problem, and this is the problem. But nobody actually gave tools. And I was thinking, it was kind of bittersweet, because it was like, okay, you're going to walk away from this. The kids have tools, and they had all these amazing tools that the kids were going to do and how to change their perspective and look at things. But the educators and the administrators and the police officers that were there, they were just told, we need to come together as a community, rah, suicide is a problem, social media is a problem, and that was it. And then off the way that they went. And it instilled it even more that this foundational piece is definitely missing within the parents, because we can say that we need to watch out for this and watch out for that, but if we don't have that communication line, and if we think we have an open communication line, but our teenagers don't think we have an open communication line, then where does that leave us, right? That leaves us in fear as parents, and that leaves us parenting from fear. And then whenever we parent from fear, we start to control things, right? Because we need to feel in control. We're scared to death for them. So now we're increasing their risk factors by not having that safe space and that steady space. Does that make sense? Okay. So what teens wish their parents knew about how they communicate? Sorry, the computer decided to update Windows 10 while we were about to start, right? Number 1, listen with the intent to understand and not respond. Okay, we've all done this, right? Our kids are talking to us, we already know the answer, we're waiting for them to get done with their sentence so that way we can just give it. It's a busy world, we have tons of things to do, and they're coming up and they're saying, so-and-so did this, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, and you respond. At that moment, we have told them that whatever they have to tell us is not important to us. That's not how we feel. That's not how we feel, typically. I would say the majority of parents don't feel that way. But to a teen brain and to that teenager, that's what they get back, right? How many of us have talked to a spouse or have even talked to our kids when they're on their video games and we're having a conversation and they're giving us 1-second short answers and we're like, you're not even listening. Did you even hear what I said? And then they repeat back everything you said and you're like, they were listening. But that's exactly right. The same dynamic happens to them, except what they perceive is they're trying to find a safe space. We have our safe space. We're adults. We've gone through that. We've typically found our safe space. We're not looking for something. They're always looking for something, right? They're always looking for that safe space. It can be taken away from them so quickly. They've seen it all across their school, from their friends, from everything else. So they're constantly testing, right? So listening with intent to understand and not just respond is one of the biggest things that they say that they feel that that they're not being listened to. The second thing, and I think I have this on a handout that she put on the chairs. The second thing is don't interrupt. We all know how that feels. We're going into a story and we're really excited, and you're like, I needed to get this, right? And they feel like they don't have that space, and they tend to tell stories a little bit different than we would, and sometimes they go into a little backstory because they want you to understand and they want to test out the waters, right? A lot of that backstory filler beforehand, before they get to the really good stuff, is them testing it along the way. So when we interrupt, they're done, right? We've kind of put a dam in that spot, and they can no longer just kind of free flow and free babble about it, because that's how they're processing their thoughts. A lot of times they haven't even thought about it as far as how they would say it. They don't know how to say it. They don't have the words to say it. They can't describe what they're feeling, right? They don't have the emotions. My 6-year-old, my older 3 are mine, and so I've had them full-time their whole entire lives. My 6-year-old has a different father, and so we share custody of him. And it's completely different rules at Dad's house. Totally fine, not a big deal. However, when the 6-year-old comes home, what it typically looks like is about a 30 to 45-minute meltdown of crying and arguing and fighting with their brother and sister, and just complete meltdown, to about 2 hours of running around the house like this kid has been locked in a dog cage for weeks and has not been able to move. And we had the conversation last night, like, they're trying to stop it, behave, listen, why are you fighting with me? You know, trying to stop that flow of information for him. But for him, he needed to get his stuff out, right? He needed to get his energy out. He didn't know why he was feeling that way. He doesn't know why he melts down when he comes back. He just knows that he's full of a pent up stuff, right? And our kids are like that every day at school. We have information. We're going from one class to the next class to the next class, having to sit there still and listen and divulge information that we have been told that if we don't get this information right, we're never going to go to college, we're never going to get a good job, we're never going to amount to anything. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure for these kids. So a lot of times you're going to come and it's going to be a big old babble thing, and we're going to think we know what they're talking about, and it's going to be something totally, completely different, right? So interrupting was another one of theirs. I'm pretty sure I'm missing one on here. All right. Validate their feelings. How many of you said, you just don't know how good you have it? I have. There are kids that are on the street right now that don't even have a toy, and you won't even share your toy with your brother or sister. We all do it. It's just, we do. And to them, what they hear is, my emotion doesn't mean anything. I'm not allowed to have this emotion. and I should just be grateful. Now you have to remember, like, I deal with struggling kids. Okay, this is what's coming from the kids who struggle. Not all parents do all of these things across the board. But the thing is when we have a good baseline that we can continue to use these tools throughout it, when things do start to struggle, because who has not struggled in this room in their life? Right? Not one of us has not struggled, and not like a little bit of struggle, but something very, very major in our life that has typically brought us to our knees, and we've wondered how we're going to get through it in our lives, right? These communication tools, when we can have that baseline there for the kids, when things do get to the point that it does bring you to your knees, you're the safe spot. That doesn't mean you're an enabler. That doesn't mean that you're coddling your kids all along. That means that you're giving them a spot that they can always come back to no matter what it was that they did. And a lot of times, they're gonna test you with other people's stories. It might even be their own story, that they say that is somebody else's story, but they're gonna test that along the thing, right? So, you know, my friend so-and-so skipped school today, and you're like, oh my God, he skipped school today, what happened? Like, I hope that their parent, you know, grounds them for 3 weeks, and do you know how important it is? You just told your kid, oh, I will never admit that that was something that I did, because that's the reaction that I'm gonna get, right? And not saying that it's right, like, okay, kids, go ahead, skip school, there's no boundaries, it's a free-for-all. But it's still, you're able to go through those struggles and have the conversations that are just on a more healthy dynamic. So when things do go really wrong, and they will, they have a safe place to go. And nobody wants to tell somebody, like, I had a really bad day. Oh, really? You had a bad day? You should have heard about mine. And we all have friends like that, right? Like, we're like, okay, we're not gonna tell you anymore, right? Every one of us do. And that's what we're doing to our kids. That's what we're doing to our kids. Not on purpose, but quite inadvertently, but it's still creating that space where it's just not safe to come and say, hey, you know, I'm really struggling here. Which brings it to acting without judging and not fixing. A lot of times, they just want to talk about it. They'll come up with their own resources of what they can do, and you want them to, right? You want them to own their action steps afterwards. And the only way for them to own their action steps and to have that emotional buy-in and that physical buy-in is for them to really kind of come up with it themselves, which I can probably guess that 95% of the women here have used that tool on a significant other. That planting the seed, that whatever that other person's decision was theirs when it really came from somewhere else, right? And we do that all the time with our kids. But having them own that thing gives them that kind of buy-in, right? To this was something that I chose to do, even if it was a seed planted. Having a aunt, a trusted friend, somebody else plant those seeds. Because as much as they want us to always be there for them, and as much as we want to be their safe place, there are things that parents just can't fix because we're too close to it, right? There's too much emotional investment on our part that as emotionally detached as you want to be to come up with like a super healthy solution and be all positive, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, my daughter, when she started self-harming in 7th grade, we've gone through it all. I mean, Rajani called me the day after she got picked up for drinking on campus as a sophomore year her sophomore year in high school, because the resource officer was afraid that I wasn't taking it serious enough. I have 4 kids. My 19-year-old son works full-time, has a government job, and has his own vehicle, has paid for everything since he was 15 years old. super solid kid. My 14-year-old doesn't do anything. She's, you know, super solid in her own right. My 6-year-old is way too early to tell, but gosh only knows what he could do with his life. And my 17-year-old struggles. And she has struggled and struggled and struggled. And that was her path, right? She's making her way, and it's lots of bends, and there's lots of decisions in there that I would not have chosen for her. But I've also watched all of those decisions make it a lot stronger. And I'll tell you, when we started our journey, it wasn't near as pretty as it is right now when it came to the communication between her and I. It was me pulling her into counselors' offices. It was her and I screaming back and forth at the top of my lungs because I was scared. I was so scared for my daughter. So scared for my daughter. We have that 20/20 vision, right? We can look back and we can say, I see that path you're taking. I know where that can lead you. I am scared to death something bad is going to happen to you, so I'm just going to kind of keep you in my bubble. And if I keep you in my bubble, I can see you all the time, you're safe, and I feel better. And what that does to them is tells them, you don't trust me to make any decisions of my own. I am not capable of doing it. I cannot make the decisions on my own. And so we turn back into that right, that swirl of that negative self-talk and self-esteem and things like that. They're really simple fixes. Your kid comes home and they're throwing things around. Typically, what would you think that had happened? It was most likely, right, a bad day. What is a typical response that we usually give when a kid comes home and they just really come home in a really crappy mood? Anybody? Huh?
Did you have a bad day?
Do you say, did you have a bad day? Yeah, yeah. Did you have a bad day? So is that an open-ended question or is that a closed-ended question? Does that leave room for elaboration, or is it something that they can just cut you off? Cut you off, right? Typical response from us, right? Did you have a bad day? And usually not in the nicest of tones. But that leaves that thing of them to answer yes or no. No, I didn't have a bad day. I'm fine. Everything's good, right? As they walk up into their room. An example of an open-ended question is, I can see that, let me think, because that would not be an open-ended question. Would you like to talk about it, right? That's another typical response. So see, like even no matter this is what I do, you still go to your normal kind of thing is, you know, having those kinds of closed off. That's why I brought my book. So that way when I'm standing up here and I draw a blank, I can help. This is a really good resource. It's called the Parent's 20-Minute Guide. It is produced by the Center for Motivation and Change. Now they are a substance use facility on the East Coast. However, they work with drugfree.org, which is the partnership. It used to be called the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. It's now just called the Partnership. They train parent peer support facilitators, and they have a free parent coaching program. So if your child does struggle, you can call their helpline at any time, let them know that you would like to talk with a coach, and the coach will connect with you, and it's a 5 to 6 week virtual coaching session. They use this guide that is on their website that you do not have to pay. If you want to pay for it and get the nice book, you can. If you want to just download the PDF or download the individual worksheets, you can. It goes through helping with understanding, helping with self-care, how to take care of ourselves as parents, helping with words, which is all on communication, and then helping with actions. Now, a lot of this stuff is obviously geared to somebody who is dealing with a child who is in active substance use, because that's what it's for. But their communication section, if you just go on there, is absolutely phenomenal, because it will have you do the things that we're talking about right here, which is what are examples of closed-ended questions, what are examples of open, and have you try and think of what fits with your family. Like, I can say the exact same, what means the exact same thing to each one of my kids, and I say it a different way every single time, right? Because what my son hears when I say one thing and what my daughter hears when I say the exact same thing are two completely and totally different things. Like, you would think that we were in passing ships. It's kind of crazy. So a closed question, are you mad at your teacher for calling us? Allows them just to answer yes or no, right? An open-ended question, what is your reaction to your teacher calling us? Leaving that space for them to, number one, have to answer, right? And number two, leaving it open for them to have that kind of communication. And when we're able to have that kind of communication with them and put it in on their terms, instead of like, your teacher called and then we go through about our whole entire thing about how we feel about it all, and then we ask them, where do you think they already are by the time that they answer our questions? Defensive, probably hurt, you know, myriad of emotions. They've already gone into what they assume. Just had a conversation with both my 18 and my 17-year-old today. Will you please stop assuming you know what I'm going to say next? That was not the conversation I was about to have. I was about to say something totally different. You know, please, but that's our normal thing, right? Oh, I better get on this beforehand, because that is a protective factor. And that's something that they use to protect their emotions. Because if they can get to it first, and if they can believe that that's what you're about to say, then they're prepared for whatever else comes out. Does that make sense? Typically, most of us do this. Closed question, do you think you shouldn't have a curfew? Open-ended question, what about this curfew do you think isn't fair? Because it opens them up, right? And we can be right still. I mean, we typically are. My son said to me today that he's always right, except when I have told him something first, then he's usually wrong. But he still likes to go test it all out and make sure that whatever I did tell him the first time was correct, because that's how he works. You know, I can tell my 14-year-old that that's how something works, and she's like, okay, like I don't need to try it. You know, they're all completely different. Do you have any questions? Do you have any like specific things that you guys are struggling with, communicating with them, or what you're dealing with, them coming in, that you'd like to talk about? Yeah.
So when you said that you keep them in a bubble because you're scared, so what do you do when the second you let them out of that bubble, they make a mistake, or they make the same mistake that they were in trouble for before? Like, pretty much the second she gets in a little bit of freedom, she blows it and gets in trouble. And it's a lot of times, like I said, what she was already in trouble for before, where she just got grounded. So I guess where do you draw the line? Whether to keep them in the bubble, or I guess it's what we're struggling.
So that is really great that you asked that, because that is actually one of the points right there. You need to change the battery.
No, can you repeat the question?
Oh, so you asked, how do you respond to a child who we keep in a bubble, right? And as soon as we give them that minute of freedom, they go out and they reoffend, pretty much,
Right.
and do the same thing, yeah, instantly, and bring it back. So my second point on this next slide is, it's probably not what you think it is. So we see it as behaviors, right? And we see it as acting out, but there's always something underneath that's driving it. always something underneath that's driving it. We typically deal with the symptoms of whatever issue it is that we're dealing with, which is the offense, right? They stayed out past curfew, they continually stay out past curfew. We ground them, we take away all of their stuff. The moment they get all of their stuff back, they go out past curfew again. There is some underlying power struggle there, whether it's within themselves or not, but there's always an underlying fear, and that would be that open conversation. We've grounded you from this 17 times, and the moment we let you off, you reoffend, right? What can we do different? What do you think should happen? If you were a parent and you were in my shoes, what would you do with your child? And putting it back on their terms, right? Because what it does is it takes them out of their own space and has to look at it at a whole entire different perspective. And they also own it, right? As that, like, this is my consequence. This is what should happen. Oh, yeah, I guess I see that you probably don't have another choice. Right? I see that you have tried everything else, and we continually do this. But it leaves that space open for them to be a part of the conversation, and that's a huge thing for teens. Like, we have to remember, like, they're really close to adulthood. By the time that they're in high school, it is a very, very, very quick hop, skip, and a jump before those kids are 18, and they are legally responsible for every action they take, every action. And in that amount of time, we can't expect them to get all of the skills they need to be a fully functioning, capable adult. But we do need to give them enough space to make those decisions and figure out, test the waters, kind of push that envelope a bit. And maybe that's their way of pushing the envelope, but definitely opening up that conversation of this, what we're doing right now is not working. For my sanity, because I'm about to blow and lock you in your room for the next 3 years, we need to come to we need to come to a census, right, that works for both of us. What do you think that should be? Does that help? It's so frustrating. Yeah. Yes. Is there another one? Anyone else?
I don't even know how to ask this. It happened last night, and my daughter, she just had a meltdown. She was just crying, and I know hormones are part of it, and she's getting ready to turn 13, and she just was crying, and she's like, "You're not even saying anything. There's no any advice for me," and I didn't know what to say. Is it okay not to know?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
I felt like such a failure last night.
Oh, no. So I'm just repeating, but your daughter had a meltdown yesterday, and
just things she's dealing with friends and.
Right, just a normal meltdown. Yeah, just overload.
Nothing really bad.
Right.
In my opinion.
Right.
But her opinion was her whole world was falling apart last
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think, this is her world. In my mind, it's like, this is nothing.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that.
That is awesome that you did not say that this is nothing. No, it absolutely is. Like, it's absolutely, and it is absolutely okay to not know what to say. And I cannot.
I felt like such a loser. And when we got home, because this was all driving.
Yeah.
We got home, I just said, just give me a hug.
Yeah.
And I just said, everything's going to be okay, and I'm right here for you no matter what. And
Yeah.
But I went to bed feeling really, like I just didn't handle it right. I don't know.
Oh, well, first thing, we all do the best we can at every single moment with the tools we have at the moment. Plain and simple, we always do the best we can. Like, we are not out there if you are sitting here in this room making an effort to come out of your house at 6:30 on a Tuesday night after a holiday, You are doing the best you can, and probably more than that, every single day of your life. Every day of your life. And there are times that we don't know what the answers are, and that is totally and completely fine, and I would, and I have responded, I'm so sorry you feel this way. I wish I had magic words to make it all go away for you. You know, why don't you come here and cry it out? My 6-year-old says that he tells his friends, my mom said that crying is a way to release stress from your body, and it is okay. And that's true. Crying is a way to relieve stress from your body. Oh yeah, because she let it all out. I mean, a lot of times their behavior, their explosions, they're crying, they're slamming their doors, all of that stuff, they're pressure cookers. They are pressure cookers. And we're not any different as adults. I mean, you cannot say that every one of us has never had a bad day and hasn't come in the house kicking and screaming about something. I still do it on a regular basis, and I'm super passive aggressive. Thank you, Mom, for passing that along, that I work really, really hard not to do on an everyday basis. And I've gotten a lot better. But I still come in, well, maybe we'd be able to do something if somebody would do the dishes in this house. Stop, Ange. And then I'll say stop, you know, and I recognize I'm having, obviously, a bad day. I'm like, okay, Mom needs a timeout. And I started giving myself timeouts when, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, when it all started. And they'll tell me sometimes that I need a timeout. Like, your veins popping out on your forehead, Mom, like, maybe you should go outside. Maybe I should. They call it deep breathing, and I accidentally did it at the eyeglass doctor the other day. My daughter left her glasses where the brand new puppy could get them. And of course, the lens popped out. And of course, I had worked from that morning until 5 o'clock at night, and we had to go and, you know, do the thing, and then we couldn't even get the contacts that night. She can't see to save her life. It's like 2 weeks to order glasses, right? And the lady tells me she needs to do a class. The doctor wants her to do a class. And I went, and Katie goes, you just deep breathed that lady. And I was like, stop, I'm trying not to explode. Like, this is my way. You have to let me deep breathe. It's the only way that I don't explode on you, right? Oh, so, you know, but they have the same thing. A lot of times we just don't allow that space for them, right? We want them to be nice and respectful, and we don't want them having bad days. And a lot of it is because it hurts, right? It hurts. It broke your heart, absolutely broke your heart, to see her completely melt down like that.
I just felt like she thought this was her whole world was falling apart. And I knew it wasn't. I just wanted to say that to her so bad that.
Thank you for not.
And she's like, why aren't you giving me any advice right now? In my mind, I was like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, and say, I'm sorry, I honestly don't have any advice. You know, I am sorry that you're feeling that way. And honestly, by you not saying, you know, to her it did feel like it was her whole entire world. To her it did feel that way. I mean, is there anybody in this room who can say that they have completely melted down about something that felt really strong to them, and the other person didn't say something back, you know, like that? I mean, how does that make us feel when somebody says to us, oh, really? That's what you're struggling with your kid? Like, okay, you should do my struggle. Like, you know what right? And it makes us feel like, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to struggle, because it feels really crappy and it hurts a lot, that, you know what I mean, that we're going through with that. And that's how they feel too, is that it does feel like their whole entire world, and we don't understand. And that's only because we can't go back, right? Because we're already through that whole entire space. We've already gotten the tools that we needed when we were, you know, through growing up, that they're still trying to forge through, and they're still trying to find, and they need times like that in order to find them, because those aren't tools that we can teach them. We can't teach them self-esteem. We can't teach them resilience. Those are things that you get from acting and doing. Those are things you get from failing and succeeding. We can't teach them, you know. It's not like that Stuart Smalley where, you know, I like myself. Like that doesn't, they need to fail, right? And they need to know that they can do it. And that's why it's important to have that communication line. So when they do fail, you say, I know you can do it. You may not feel like you can do it right now. I do have faith in you that we will make it through this space. Whatever you need from me, I'm here. I may not always have the answers. I may not always say the right things. But I promise you, I will always be here to bounce those ideas off from. And if you don't want my opinions, which a lot of times they don't, if you don't want my opinions, you won't get it unless you ask for it. And those can be solid communication roles, you know, that those are kind of like that expected thing. It takes practice on our end because we want to give them, you know, the opinions. But yeah, I'm sorry, it's so hard when we watch them just, yeah. But you know, they're under a lot of pressure. They're under a lot of pressure that we just never were. And we had natural ways to get our energy out, right? And we kind of don't, not only do they have an increasing amount of pressure, we've also taken away, you know, a lot of their natural getting out. Like, I don't remember my class periods, like the in-between time being so short. I remember going to my locker, talking, decompressing from a class, and moving on to a next class. Is that what everybody else remembers? Yes. Okay. And right, and now we don't have lockers, and now we have, like I remember when I'd come to pick up my son's like 6 feet tall, right? And of course, I'm this tall. And he'd be like, Mom, you cannot come during passing hour. And I was like, I know, like I feel, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be totally run over. These kids are like, beelining it, right, from one thing to another. So we don't even have, we've taken away that kind of natural decompression of like, hey, that class really sucked. Did you hear what that teacher said? Or what was our assignment that we're going to this next class for? Like, do you have a copy of that so I can look over it real quick and know what I'm looking for, right? We've taken kind of all of those things out, and then we're scheduled out into the things. So and they feel social media that they have to be connected at all times, right? Like having conversations. Shoot, I feel that way on my phone. You know, there are 4 or 5 different people that are texting me at the exact same time, and I've had to practice. You don't have to answer them just because they text you. Like, you don't have to do that, you know? They're kind of waiting that out, right, and figuring that out. So we see a lot more of that. And the fact that she could completely break down with you, like, that's amazing. That in itself is amazing. She wasn't in her room crying underneath her pillow so no one would hear her. She wasn't in the bathroom crying all alone in isolation so no one could hear her. She felt safe enough with you to completely be open and vulnerable and break down. That's a huge thing. That's a huge thing.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Absolutely.
Just that book you mentioned, the 20-minute guide.
Yes.
Is that for purchase on Amazon or?
Right off the.
I looked it online. It's that all the materials are free.
So I know. When you go onto their website, you can download it, but you have to like click on the worksheet that you want, and then you go up there, and then there's able to open up the PDF, and then there's a way to save it and download it. But there is a way to download it all online. They just don't make it very easy. You kind of have to go through a couple ways to look at it. It is easier to do this, but they have like the, what's that called? You know, this thing at the front? Table of contents, thank you. it's been a long day, that you can go to the exact section that you want to, and you can download, and they made it super easy, like 2 to 4 pages tops for each section that they have. So the other one that I like going through is the offering information. And that one is called the information sandwich. And how we offer information. Like we have really good information. We have gone through life for a lot longer than they have. They just don't like to listen to it. And maybe it's because it's the way that we are approaching it, right? And the way that we're saying, like, hey, this would be the best for you, which they automatically hear, I don't know how to do it, it's not my own way, I'm not gonna do it that way, I'm gonna do it my own way, right? Paying attention to signs, if the kids are ready to speak or not, like if they're ready to have a conversation or not. You know, last night would not have been the best time to like bring up a full entire conversation, but I do know parents that do, you know, bring up conversations with them in a time that they're not ready to talk. So paying attention to the signals is another one, like the red light, green light, yellow light, kind of assessing of where they're at. Hey, do you mind if we sit down and do you have time to sit down and have a conversation right now about this? Hey, yeah, totally, you know, absolutely, all right, cool. And we sit down and we talk, right? Then we offer it with love or with their perspective, right? Instead of this is what I want you to do. So it's kind of a back-ended way, but what that does is it brings their defenses down. So they don't automatically have that defense up of I have to respond, because just like we told, you know, you guys, like, let's respond instead of react, they're the same thing, right? A lot of times they're reacting instead of listening to the whole thing. Maybe they think that they've heard the conversation before, they know what you're gonna say, so they're just ready to respond to you, react to you, and they're not listening. So taking that whole entire thing. So asking permission, would it be helpful for you to hear? Could I offer a thought? Can I ask a question? I have a couple ideas, but did you wanna say your ideas first? Right, kind of opening that dialogue up. And then once that is green light and you're able to go, you know, providing options, offer, don't impose, and allow disagreement. Letting them disagree with you is a super awesome tool for them to understand and to learn to become adults, right? Like, we have to remember our prime goal is not to keep our kids safe. It is not to make sure that they go to college. It's not to make sure that they get a great job. Our goal in life is to raise adults. Adults that are gonna react with other adults, right? And adults that are gonna know how to handle situations with other adults. And if we're not giving them the opportunity to at least practice and pretend that they're an adult, they don't know what to do when they get out, you know, because they've never been in that situation before. I mean, how long did it take? For me, it probably took me until I was about 35 before I feel like I started acting like an adult. And I asked my mother last summer, when do you actually feel like an adult? Because I think that at 42 with 4 kids, one that is legally an adult, I should feel like an adult, but sometimes I just don't. And I wonder how we got, you know what I mean, this far. And it takes that kind of practice, right? And giving them that safe space, but asking their permission, offering the answers instead of telling them what to do. What that does is it engages them in the conversation and it helps them own it, right? So they can make their own decisions. But we have to be prepared as parents that they may make a decision that we don't wholeheartedly agree on. And we need to be okay with making decisions that we don't 100% agree with. Barring, of course, something that puts them in danger, something that puts their friends in danger, right? Something that is against the law, Like I definitely wouldn't say, oh, hey, Samantha, which is my son, go ahead, go buy some pot and drive your car while you're at it with your brother in the back seat, you know? And I know parents that do that. Not, you know, we have to have our boundaries and not allow it, but she will make decisions, right, that I don't completely agree with. She will take an Uber when I would rather have her call me, but she's about 3 months away from being an adult. And it's some of those things that we kind of have to loosen up that boundary a little bit and decide what is our absolute and what isn't. You know what I mean?
Who pays for the Uber?
Huh?
Who pays for the Uber?
She does. Oh yeah. No, dude, I'm poor. I am so poor. Yeah, that's one good thing about being poor is my kids have always had to figure it out themselves when it comes to those kinds of things, but there's downsides to that too. And then checking back and clarifying is the last part of that information sandwich. So, and you know, does that make sense to you? You know, what do you think about that? Did I explain that, you know, all right? Do you have any questions with that? Having those kinds of questions, making sure that things are clear, concise, that we're not, you know, missing something, that even though we're on this track, make sure that they're not on a track going the opposite way. Like, you know, what do you think that you know, how do you feel about that, right? Making sure that we're both on the exact same page with that information, because things do kind of get twisted. And if us as parents are having a really hard emotional day, we need to be able to take a break ourselves and not bring our emotions into their conversations with them, right, in their lives with them. And that's another thing that the teens have said before, is that my parents can have bad days and can completely go off on me for what I feel is nothing. And if I get upset about anything that they do, then I'm the one who's in trouble, right? We've all done that. We've all done that. And what that does is they now don't trust that situation, right? That they don't. Having those kind of that set guidelines, my kids say to me more than probably the average Joe. And there have been times that I have been like, seriously cannot say that in public, because the stares that I get from other people are really uncomfortable. But we have a whole entire different relationship typically than a lot of people do. Part of it is my 14-year-old has been with my big kids, right, the whole entire time, so she tends to feel that she's older. She's also been super headstrong, like her whole entire life, and there are things that we have decided are acceptable and are not acceptable. Like, we can joke around with one another and maybe say things that would be inappropriate, but when we take it to that next level, when it comes to disrespect and when it comes to flat out being mean or being hurtful, like, that is not allowed. You know, being able to have that kind of tiered boundaries, what they can say to me now as, you know, 18, 17, and 14-year-olds compared to what they could say to me at 6 are completely and totally different, right? Completely and totally different. The conversations that we're able to have, and I would say a side effect to be prepared for is when you do have that open line of communication, you're going to hear things you wish you didn't. And they're going to test you with some information that you, as a mother, and it might not happen the same way for men and fathers, it might be totally okay, but as a mother, there is information that I've had about my children's lives that I was like, oh, I am still your mother. I am still your mother, but knowing how to still leave that open, right? Because there were questions that had come out of certain experiences that they had had that needed an adult answer. that it wasn't something their friends could that could answer to them, at least with the correct information, and a lot of it, sometimes it needed to have that adult supervision if it was a friend, or if it was them that was struggling with a certain thing, is having that. And there have been a lot of times that it was information that I literally had to go in my room and kind of decompress and process the information before I had a conversation with them. And that's completely okay too, is giving yourself that time, right? If they trigger you, how good are they at pushing your buttons? Right? Like they know them all, and they've been pushing them. So they've been testing you since they were like 2 on which buttons work the best, and for what scenario, works the best, and what hurts the most, right? That's gonna make you blow, so that way now you're the bad guy and they're off the hook, right? That's a protective mechanism for them. That is a way that we hurt other people because we're hurting inside and we don't know how to say that we're hurting inside. Does that make sense? And so we're their safe space. And so we'll hear a lot of things, and we'll get a lot of things that are uncomfortable for us. And as parents, we have to be able to say, this conversation cannot happen right now because I am way too triggered, I am way too emotional, I am way too volatile, I feel like I'm gonna say something that is not gonna be conducive, and I need to step out. And we need to think about, I need to think about this before we come back. When I picked Sam up from the resource office, and that was so she's a senior now, so it was a year and a half ago, so we had been doing the parent presentations for 2 years. So here I am as a mom who has been giving parent presentations, doing community events, speaking all of this, and I'm leaving a rehab that I work at to come and pick up my 16-year-old daughter who had blown a .14 with alcohol on her, and walking into this school that I have, been at, and I was like she knows better. She knows better. She knows all of it. What was she thinking? And the whole way I'm on my phone with my sister, I'm gonna kill her. She knows better. I can't believe that she did this, blah, blah, blah. And then realizing as I walk in, it's not about me. It wasn't about me. It wasn't to hurt me. It didn't have anything to do with me. It didn't have anything to do with me. She was struggling. She could not handle the environment she was in, and she was self-medicating because she needed to feel some way different than she did. I could not have that conversation with her. I picked her up, I signed all of the papers, I barely said a word in the whole entire, meeting. I went home, I took all of the booze out of the house, I took all of the electronics away. I said, I am going back to work and we will discuss this when I get home. And that's exactly what I did. I went back to work and I cooled down. And I took my emotions out of it. My whole, oh my gosh, what am I, in for at this point, right? So that way I could sit down and have a conversation with her and know where she was emotionally and mentally at the time, and come up with an appropriate for her punishment. And to know that boundary line, right, was crossed, and that boundary looks the punishments look completely different for all of my kids, and that's part of having that open relationship, right, that communication space, because you know what's going to work better for them than what's not. Right, we all sat down as a family one day and we had the other kids say, what do you think the best punishment would be for, each other, right? And had their siblings say, oh, if you did this. And so we get to my 17-year-old, I think she was 14 at the time, and the kid said, take away her makeup. And she goes, oh, no, you are not taking away my makeup. And I was like, okay, that's it. That's it right there. And my younger one, I think she maybe has mascara, she doesn't, if I took away her makeup, it would be nothing. But if you take away the phone from her, she is like, oh no. Like, no, you can't, you know, at this age now, you can't do that. My son doesn't text, he doesn't Snapchat. Like, we had to teach him to text. The girls were like, if you ever want a relationship, you have to learn how to text, because girls this age are texting and you need to know how to have a conversation with them. So I could take away his phone, it wouldn't make a difference. If I take away his truck, on the other hand, that is a huge thing, right? And being able to have that, knowing what works right, what works best for them, and kind of where they are on the emotional scale. Any questions? Rajani, can you think of anything that we might not have talked about or that you wanted to have talked about that wasn't discussed?
I think you covered everything. At school, I used that handout so much.
Oh,
Because I see a lot of times there's just miscommunication with the teenagers and their parents, and both have good intentions, but the style is so different. And, you know, it's just that active listening and really being with them. And, you know, kids roll their eyes, and sometimes parents aren't listening, or they might be focused on their computer or messages, that unless you give that undivided attention, then this teenager is going to open up more and more and more when they feel like my parents are really listening to what I have to say, and everybody has their phones away, and you know, it's not like while you're cooking or doing other things, it's just that face-to-face, you know, eye contact, and really validating what they're saying, repeating it, so they know you're really in the moment and listening. So I think just, I mean, communication is simple, but it's so complex. And, you know, so the more, I think when parents and kids have both tried those strategies and really put the effort in, it really does work and kind of builds that relationship. Because these are such critical years during high school, you know, because you want to have that amazing relationship where your child wants to come back home, right? Once they go off to college, and they really have that bond and know that they can come to their parents for anything. And it's a lot of work, but it pays off. And it's just being aware of it on a regular basis, you know, and catching yourself.
yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it is work that we have to do ourselves, right? Not coming from our hurts and our angers and our fears, and you know, and the things that they're driving us. And sometimes, you know, hindsight is not, I mean, having all of our information is not so good. It comes against us. Having all of this information out about the social media, about, I mean, predators, homicide, every single break-in is on social media, where literally, if you look at our crime stats, we're as safe as the 60s, the 50s and 60s. Like, we experienced a 10 times greater danger as teenagers than our teenagers are having right now. But we would never know that, because anything that happens at all in another state, in another country, you know, completely, totally different space, we have that information immediately, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's not a safe place, right, for our kids. And, you know, and all the social media as far as them, like what apps can they go on, you know, the predators that are out there. Like, we as parents, we see all of this stuff, we internalize it, we want to keep our kids safe, but what happens is we just end up running in fear all the time. And you cannot parent from fear effectively. You just can't, because we're not seeing our kids as where they are in their developmental process. We don't see the kids for the behavior that's coming out for what it really is. We tend to miss the signs that it's something underlying, because all we're thinking about is the damage that could be done. And because of that, so my son, when he was, he's just graduated, when he was a sophomore, he was struggling. And he'd always been an AB student, and he was failing this class. He had a lot of missing assignments. And for me, there's no excuse for missing assignments. I mean, come on, like, you know that it's due, just turn it in. And it was like the one, like, as long as you're trying was always my thing, right? Just try, but you have to have all of your assignments in. Missing assignments are no excuse. So I'm on him like white on rice. And it's getting towards the end of the quarter, and we are still in the failing, and we still have like 15 missing assignments. And I'm like, I thought you did this. You said you did this, blah, 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 blah. And he had been making weird comments. My brother passed away, his uncle passed away of a heroin overdose 4 years ago. And he was making comments like if he would ever commit suicide, that he would use heroin because you die high, and that would be the best way to die. And I was like, that's really odd that he says that, considering, you know, his background. But, you know, those were things that just kind of were said on passing. And so I'm on him one night, and we'll never forget this night. And I said, it seems like you don't even care. Like, we have this conversation all the time. And he goes, stop saying I don't care. And I was like, whoa. Like, okay, like I obviously hit something there, right? Like a trigger. So I took a minute and I went outside, and he came down outside with me, and I said, listen, I may have overreacted and thought that you didn't care, but when you don't talk to me and you don't tell me what's going on, I go into my head and I create these amazing scenarios that are happening. And the majority of the time, they're way worse than is really what is going on. But I'm trying to rationalize it and trying to figure it out, and I'm a problem solver. It's what I do. Like, you know, I'm trying to fix it. And if you don't talk to me, I don't know what it is. So I come up with my own things. And he goes, and I said, I mean, I have my ideas, but I don't know if that's right. And he said, well, what do you think it is? And I said, honestly, I said, I think that you are at the point right now, your pressure, that you have the means, you have the opportunity and the way, and that you would be my kid, that I would come in and you would have already died by suicide, and you would have given me no warning signs, no, you know, signs before that. And he said, you're absolutely right. And I stopped and I said, okay. I said, so where do you want us to go right now? What would you like me to do? What would you like my role to be when it comes to this class? The kid had never failed before. He had always done so well. He was, you know, almost an Eagle Scout by 12 years old, 13 years old. Like, he just is one of those kids that just pushes himself and puts way more pressure on himself than I could ever put on him any day of the week. And I said, what do you want from me? And he said, Mom, he goes, whatever happens this quarter, and we'll figure it out next quarter. And I said, okay. And I didn't say another word, and he did end up failing the class, and we did end up retaking it. But it was that, like, juncture of time that if him and I didn't have that relationship where we sat there and talked, if I wouldn't talk to him, like, literally he would come in, and boys typically, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, their brains turn on and they want to have that conversation. And he would come in and he would wake me up and start talking to me, and I would, like, groggily, you know, sit up and have that conversation with him. And if I hadn't been in my recovery at the time and sober at the time, I honestly don't know if I would have caught the signs of it or not. And so we just never know what that's going to be, right? And having that conversation and having that space where we know how our kids react to things, we know that there's something underlying, that their behavior, their outward behavior is never the real thing, that it's always something underlying, helps us a lot as they're growing up, right? To understand what's going on and to intervene a little early. And not let it, you know, get to be something that maybe can't be taken back, or that we can't quite handle ourselves.
So how do you find out what the underlying thing is? Like, if you know it's something, but they won't talk to you.
I have them see someone if they can, if they will.
But they don't like who they're seeing.
Switch your therapist.
What if the old therapist that they like said that they can't no longer see them, so they have to see somebody else. I mean, this is like, so like
Yeah.
keep switching, like when, you know, she used to see somebody and then that lady recommended somebody else, we found somebody else, and then she doesn't like her, she wants to go back to the old person.
Yeah, and then she won't, honestly, I mean, honestly, like, I would just continue trying. And do you have like tools as far as like things that you give the kids to try and figure out where they're coming from? That kind of thing?
I mean, sometimes if parents are having struggles, you can always contact me. And without saying that, you know, your mom called, I can just kind of, in a roundabout way, you know, have a conversation with them and try to build rapport and figure out if they'll share something with me that's going on that sometimes parents may not even know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes kids open up.
I know, all I keep thinking is like a peer group for her. So, because if she had a peer group, she would understand, but you have those.
Say also, we do have support groups here.
She doesn't go anywhere.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
oh, where does she go?
Chandler, you know, Chandler.
They have the prevention coach,
Yes.
Sarah Hunter, and I will get you her information if you would like her.
We
Let me
also
get you.
have a mental health therapist there at Chandler High School.
That's is that their prevention coach, Sarah?
No, it's a different person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we do have some resources.
They are trying to make a mindfulness room there too. I don't have it right there. It's in my computer, but we'll get you that number. Yeah.
But if you do have a child at Hamilton, we have quite a few support groups here. We have 2 for girls that struggle with anxiety, depression, or self-harm. We have 1 for substance abuse, 1 for anger and stress management, and then 1 for boys that struggle with anxiety and depression. So, you know, if you have a student that is struggling in any way, please let me know and we can try to support them any way we can.
Do you know if at Castile, that's where my daughter goes, do they have support group? I mean, I don't know. I haven't even looked into it.
I don't think they do.
Not sure.
One of our goals is to really create more peer groups for our teenagers and also for the parents, because like that is actually my last thing on there, is that you're not alone. Because we tend to, if we have any problems with our kids, just figure out that we'll just figure it out ourselves and we're going to fix it and nobody else is going to understand. Like, I can promise you, if you are going through it, somebody else is going through it. I can promise you that, you know, a lot of us are struggling, and there's nothing worse than struggling alone. We don't want our kids to struggle alone, so we shouldn't have to do it either. The other one. Drugfree.org. Thank you. Drugfree.org. You can hook up with a parent coach if you would like, if your kid is struggling. And even if they're not struggling with substances, you can call their clinicians that are on there, and you can call them as many times as you want. They are all master level clinicians, and they will help get you resources for whatever it is that you're struggling with also. And they don't have to be using substances in order to use the partnerships line. That's drugfree.org. Yeah. They have an amazing thing. Full Circle is a really great peer group if your child does struggle with substances, and I really wish we had a Full Circle for those who don't struggle with substances but struggled with anxiety, depression, that kind of thing.
I was just going to mention Teen Lifeline.
Oh, Teen Life! I love Teen Lifeline.
Yeah, anybody can, any teenager can call. It's anonymous.
And text.
They have teens that are trained on the other end who can help them with resources, problem solving, and just somebody safe to talk to. So
And, you know, and honestly, Teen Lifeline does so much training for their teens that I think that they're a very, very good option if you have a child who's struggling also to volunteer to be a part of the Teen Lifeline, because they don't just put them right on the phones. You get all of the training, and they do a lot of mental health training, personal wellness, self-care. They have a hangout room that has a couch and it's a safe place for the teens to go. And so if they're struggling, it's a really good place, I think, to get some of the training they need.
We're also going to be for all the badges the kids have here. We're going to have these stickers that in a couple of days that Teen Lifeline's bringing.
Yeah.
So all the kids that way will have the number on the back of their badge in case they're stressed and need to talk to somebody. So we'll get that. And next year we'll get printed on the badges.
Yeah. And we need to bring it up to your schools that you'd like to have this stuff available for your kids if you don't go here to Hamilton. I mean, when Rajani started out, it was just a couple parents, but I really do think that parents are getting to the point where we don't feel like we have to hide anymore, and we realize that other people are struggling, and so we're getting to the point that we reach out for help. But you know, having that, hey, do you have, you know, a teacher who would do a group once a week with kids that, you know, could use other peers to help them, or for parents to help them, and I know, you know, that it has at least expanded. I mean, when it was you were just you were part-time the first year, right? And now you're full-time, and you have another social worker. Yeah. So, but we kind of have to push. And we have talked to Castile before about these things, and I know that, yeah, and I know that Camille is open as far as, yeah, as.
You can talk to your guidance counselor at your school, and then they'll let you know if they have.